blood and its role. So, blood is a type of connective tissue. We should know that from way back earlier in the year, and it's made of two basic parts. Cells, which would be red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, make up a little less than half, and plasma, making up water, proteins, and amino acids, slightly more than half. But cells and plasma are those two parts there. Within blood, there are three types of blood cells. We have red blood cells, fancy name erythrocytes, white blood cells, leukocytes, and our platelets are called thrombocytes. And if you look here, here is normal blood, and then there's two types of blood that have some kind of disease. You can see a big difference. Within sickle cell, you see these normal kind of donut shaped, and that's designed by that specifically to carry oxygen. And then you see the ones that are shaped deformed, so they're not as effective. They're sickle-celled. We'll talk about that later. And then there's beta thalassemia, and the same thing. All of the red blood cells here have a different shape. It's called like a beta plex, whatever. But they do have a different shape, and that's going to cause problems for people with those diseases. So our erythrocytes are red blood cells. They're made from a protein called hemoglobin. And that hemoglobin contains iron, and iron's job is to transport oxygen. It can carry oxygen with it. You can kind of see in this zoomed in picture here. Within our hemoglobin, we have iron molecules, and those iron molecules are able to bind to oxygen, because that's ultimately one of the biggest roles of blood, is to carry oxygen throughout the body to get it to different parts that need it for energy, because it's part necessary to make ATP from cellular respiration. If you don't have enough iron, you can have this disease called iron deficient anemia, and that's going to cause problems because you're not getting enough oxygen throughout your body. How do we make blood cells? Well, it's a process called hematopoiesis, and in that case, we are forming blood cells in the bone marrow. So hopefully we're familiar with where that is in our from our unit on the skeletal system. But sometimes you can have an error that causes a protein to be shaped wrong. And that's when we were talking about like sickle cell anemia and our other disease shown here. And if you look and remember your biology well, this here, we have CCT, CCT, TGG, TGG, ACC, ACC, AGG, AGG, everything's the same except one nitrogenous base, one ATC or G. And that means it's going to code for one different amino acid. And that one small difference, just one letter, one nitrogen base, changes the shape of the red blood cells and causes issues. We said another disease is sickle cell anemia, and if we look here, it's the same deal. CTT becomes CAT, changing this amino acid glutamine to valine, and that one difference causes some of those red blood cells to change shape. People are tired and pain, get more prone to strokes and organ failure, all to this due to this disease. So go ahead and pause while you put this into your notes. All right, we said it's really important that blood's one of its main functions is to carry oxygen throughout the body. And we call oxyhemoglobin the oxygen that's carrying the blood that's carrying lots of oxygen and appears bright red. Deoxyhemoglobin is low in oxygen, so maybe it's already been given to the muscles and it's going back to the heart to get more. That appears dark red. So what happens is blood delivers oxygen to the tissues and then returns to the heart through veins. We'll talk more about this in another set of notes. Then the heart sends the blood to the lungs, where we are breathing in oxygen, so it gets the blood back oxygen, and then it sends it out back to the tissues through the arteries. So arteries take oxygenated blood away from the heart. Veins carry deoxygenated blood back to the heart. And both of them meet at little vessels called capillaries, and that's where the oxygen can diffuse out into the tissues that need it. So I know a lot of people always ask, deoxygenated blood in your veins is not blue. If you look here, sorry about the dogs. This blood here has a lot of oxygen in it, so it's like what you'd find in an artery. This is low in oxygen, so it's something like you'd find in a vein. So if we look at these pictures, anything bright red is coming from an artery. Dark red would be coming from a vein. So back to sickle cell a little time, some genetics that you learned in biology. Sickle cell disease, we said it's genetic mutation, causes one base pair to be wrong, which causes one amino acid to be wrong, and that causes the shape of these red blood cells to be incorrect. And it's a disorder caused by a recessive gene. So a parent can be a carrier without having it. In other words, if you remember, big A means dominant, so that would be a normal blood cell. Small a would be recessive, which would be sickle cell. So this parent has one dominant, one recessive gene, so they're normal. All you need is one. This parent's one dominant, one recessive, so they're normal. But if they have children, they have a 1 in 4 chance that that child will have sickle cell, that it will get the recessive gene from both parents. People that have sickle cell have problems with like big spleens. That's what splenomegaly means. They're tired often, they have pain, more likely to have strokes, and even shortness of breath, all due to that oddly shaped blood cell. So go ahead and pause here while you put these into your notes. All right, moving on to the leukocytes, the white blood cells. They're divided into 2 categories. Granulocytes means that they have granular cytoplasm. And what do I mean there? Well, these are the 3 types, but if you see, these 3 are here: neutrophil, sinophil, and basophil. Granulated cytoplasm means there's like little grains, basically, in the jelly-like substance, the cytoplasm. So they're easy to see if you're given a picture of them, because they all will have those little dots or grains in it. Agranulocytes don't have those, and we'll show you a couple of pictures of those coming up. There are less white blood cells than red. Not needed as much. We need to carry oxygen all throughout the body, so there's a higher need for the red blood cells. We'll talk about white blood cell function soon. And you can notice they are significantly bigger, the white blood cells, than the red blood cells. So this chart will tell you like the percentage of each type. So within the amount of white blood cells within a blood sample you have, this breaks down what percentage of each there are. So most of them you can see are neutrophils, which are granular, and lymphocytes, which aren't. We'll talk about what they do here in a second. These numbers are important because if there are irregularities, so these numbers are off, that usually indicates some sort of disease. So if there's more eosinophils, well, their job is to attack parasites, so you probably have a parasitic infection because these guys are needed more. And we'll kind of go through each as you fill out this chart. So a neutrophil, notice, you see them here. They have a nucleus with several parts to it, but they're active phagocytes, which we'll show you in a second. Their job is to kind of eat, for lack of a better word, foreign substance that's in the body. Make up over half of the white blood cells, and they are also present in pus. You can see this guy's foot would have a lot of neutrophils in here. So anthrax is shown in orange, which is a deadly disease, deadly bacteria here. And this is a phagocytic cell, and you can see it's trying to surround it and eat it, basically bring it into the cell and break it down inside the cell to protect the body. The sinophils mostly attack parasites. They don't make up much of your white blood cell because it's pretty rare that we get parasites. But if you do contract a parasite, then these eosinophils will increase in number. Your body will recognize that and get more of these to try to kill those. Basophil, only 1% of our blood is this, and it's a blood thinner. It also produces histamines, which are important in inflammatory reactions, so it's a good thing, but they do make you swell and itch. So again, it's a necessary, kind of like a fever is necessary. Your body's raising the temperature to kills something in it, some kind of virus or bacteria. It doesn't feel good, but it's necessary, just like histamines. Monocytes, large cells, horseshoe-shaped nucleus. So you can see here this horseshoe-shaped big nucleus. And they have dendritic cells that consume pathogens and then put antigens on their surface to call in the immune system. So you can see here these dendritic cells that kind of look like the dendrites of nerve cells, neurons. They break down the pathogen and then present an antigen to call in the immune surface that specifically recognizes that signal. Our lymphocytes, nucleus is dark, takes up pretty much the whole cell. And this is the big job. This is the main defense of our immune system. These are what produce antibodies. So about 30% of the WBC, the white blood cells, are lymphocytes, and these are the kind of the most active, and they're going to fight most of our diseases. And obviously not the parasites, things we've talked about, but this is day-to-day, like common colds, that sort of thing. Just another picture on the left, you can see a lymphocyte because the purple nucleus takes up pretty much the whole cell. The right, the neutrophil, how do we know? It's got that horseshoe shape. You won't have to be able to identify the different ones, but you will have to know what they do. So pause here while you fill that out. All right, so platelets or thrombocytes, they're going to help form blood clots. So they close breaks in damaged blood vessels. You've had a cut, I'm sure, at some point in your life. It doesn't bleed forever. And the platelets, the thrombocytes, are partly responsible for that. They cause a blood clot, cause it to close up that damaged vessel. Here's a kind of a picture of what blood plasma was broken down to, or the percentage of blood here. So here's blood. We break it down. It's almost half plasma, half red blood cells, and then a little bit of white blood cells and platelets as well. So what kind of proteins are we going to find in our plasma? We find albumins, which help regulate blood pressure. Globulins help transport those antibodies. Super important in our immune response. We'll get to that in another unit. And then fibrinogen is helpful in blood clotting. Go ahead, pause while you throw those into your notes. All right, hemostasis. This is the process of stopping bleeding. So if you get cut, injured, this process is how we stop it. It involves coagulation, so joining together of blood and then clotting the blood to seal the site of the damage. You can see here, if we have too much blood, it's not able to clot, like it's bleeding badly. You can provide a tourniquet, which basically you tie it as tight as you can to put enough pressure on the arteries and veins that not much blood is coming out anymore. So how's this hemostasis work? All right, well, you see there's an injury or damage to the blood vessel. So the blood vessel spasms and serotonin is released to shrink the blood vessel, which is what you see here. So we want to shrink it so less blood's getting into it, so less blood's coming out. Then a platelet plug formation comes up and closes the opening. We said it kind of forms a plug, and then eventually fibrin forms over that and clots it, and that's what a scab is. Thrombin is an enzyme in blood plasma that causes the clotting of blood by converting fibrinogen to fibrin. Won't need that on the test, but just realize there are things at play helping here. And that coagulation we mentioned on the page before, the definition is thickening of blood to form a clot. And then remember, in a best case scenario, this is only happening when things are injured. It can happen otherwise and cause problems, but this is usually a good thing. These are problems with blood clots. I said usually coagulation is a good thing, but if you have a thrombus, it's an abnormal blood clot, and that's going to cause problems because you can see it's not going to stop the bleeding enough. And an embolus, you've probably heard embolism. An embolus is when a clot moves, so it leaves where it should be and goes somewhere where it shouldn't. So like a pulmonary embolism goes from wherever it happened, like say you have a leg cut, but that clot goes up to your lungs, and that could cause death. Cerebral embolism, brain clots, so these can be very bad things. And a lot of people who are prone to this are on blood thinners to prevent this. Go ahead, pause while you put all this into your notes. All right, hemophilia, also known as bleeder's disease. This is a trait that's carried only on the X chromosome, so it's passed from mothers to sons. The blood doesn't clot much at all, if at all, which leads to a major crisis. Little things like a bloody nose or a scrape on the knee are bad because the blood won't clot, so it can bleed and bleed and bleed. If you're good at genetics from biology, this is sex-linked trait because it's only carried on the X chromosome, which means even if the dad has it, he's not able to pass it on to a boy because he's only going to give Y chromosomes to boy. So this picture here, this Punnett square has a dad that does not have hemophilia. It's got the capital H, XY is the dad. So he's a normal dad, and the mom doesn't have it either, but she's a carrier. She has the trait on one of her sex chromosomes. So one of the outcomes can be a girl, XX, that has no chance of passing it on to a baby. A boy that has no chance of passing it on to a baby. A girl that's a carrier, so she could have a baby with it, but she doesn't have it herself. Or a 1 in 4 chance of it being a boy with hemophilia. Because again, dad cannot give any hemophilia traits to a boy because he's giving the Y, and that trait Y doesn't have the trait for hemophilia on it. If you've ever given blood, they had a blood drive here most years, so some of you might be able to do it this year. Blood is removed from the brachial vein, so they take it in the arm, the brachial vein. Most adults have 10 pints of blood, and they take 1 pint of that, so about 10% of your blood, and your body will make more. You can also donate plasma, and this is removing plasma from the blood, and then it returns the rest of the red blood cells to the donor. How's donated blood used? Well, patients with hemophilia can get blood donated, so it are able to clot. Patients with sickle cell, so they have a lower percentage of sickle cell. And if you're in surgery, replacement of blood during or after. Go ahead and put this into your notes, and then you are done.